Since tonight is the yard site of the Rebbe's father, let's learn the teaching from Rebbe's father. The Rebbe's father's writing on on everything in general was very, very brief because he didn't have regular paper and ink. Instead, Reb Simchana, she would use berries to create ink, and he would write in the margins of the various svarim that he had. He wrote in the margins of his Tanya, margins of the Zohar, and all of the teachings we have from his fathers is from Reb Simchana's sacrifice and from these writings in these margins. Most of his writings that he wrote before, not all of them, most of them, before being incarcerated, before being sent to exile, were confiscated when the KGB raided his home. But that's why, in addition to the actual words that he says, the Rebbe derives a huge amount of information from those brief words, besides the fact that the Rebbe's father is writing in Kabbalah, and therefore there's a lot that needs to be unpacked. But besides that, the writing itself had to be very brief because of the lack of space to write anything. So we learn today a teaching of Rebbe's father on Ager's Teshuva. In chapter 5 in Ager's Teshuva, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the breath of Hashem, which is the source of every soul. Every soul gets its energy from Hashem's breath. As it says in the Torah, God blew into Adam Rishon, into Adam, a spirit of life. So in chapter 2 in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that the analogy of Hashem blowing breath is to highlight how the origin of the neshama is from a very lofty place. Hashem wants to highlight that just like when you blow, it takes a lot of energy to blow, versus when you speak, it doesn't take so much energy. So Hashem's emphasizing with the word blowing that it comes from the deepest and highest levels of godliness. The neshama comes from Hashem's wisdom. But in chapter 5 in Ager's Teshuva, the Alter Rebbe says that the analogy of blowing is to convey another point. Just like when you blow, if there is some kind of interruption between your breath and the direction you're blowing into, so the interruption will separate and prevent your breath from reaching that space. So too, the neshama is called the transfer of the neshama's energy to the body is called blowing, because there could be an interruption that could separate between the neshama and the body. An avera could separate shalom between the Eibishter's energy in the body. And the analogy of this is like putting something in front of your breath. But the Alter Rebbe, before saying how an avera could separate you from you and Hashem, the Alter Rebbe first says, the truth is that there's nothing physical or spiritual that can interrupt and separate between a Jew and the Eibishter. And he brings 4 proofs. He brings a proof from Psukim. It says in the Torah, Hashem says, I fill heaven and earth. The whole world is full of His glory. And then he brings other proofs from the Zohar. There's no place void of Him, the Zohar says. The Zohar says Hashem animates all worlds. And so the Alter Rebbe brings 4 verses to demonstrate how the Eibishter is everywhere and nothing can interrupt between us and Hashem. And then, after bringing these 4 proofs, he says that an avera, the only thing that can separate is an avera. An avera separates between the neshama and the Eibishter. So Rebbe's father his question is, why are there four proofs? Why four specifically? And he explains that the four proofs correspond to the four letters of God's name. And the first two proofs are from verses in the Torah. They're from Sukkim. And the last two proofs are from the Zohar, from the oral Torah. And he explains that the written Torah is something that's just written down, which is not revealed. It's sort of hidden because it's on paper. It's not spoken about. It's written. And the first two proofs correspond to the first two letters of God's name, which correspond to Hashem's wisdom and understanding. And just like by ourselves, we don't need other people around us to think. We need other people around us to feel. We have feelings towards others. But our understanding is our own understanding. And so too, when God made the world, it says in the Torah, 6 days God had made the heaven and earth. And the chassidus asks, it should have said, in 6 days God made heaven and earth. Why does it say 6 days made heaven and earth? So chassidus explains that the 6 days refer to the 6 spheres. And each day receives its energy from a different sphere. So Tuesday gets its energy from Tiferes. That's why Tuesday is such a great day. And Zev Kessler is so excited about today because it's Tuesday. Anyways, so the various spheres below Chochmah and Bina, they are connected to creation. However, Chochmah and Bina, they're above creation. Yud K in general is called Hanistaris. It's those levels of godliness which are connected to Hashem's wisdom. They are hidden. They are beyond creation. Versus the lower levels, the latter two letters of God's name, Vav K, they are considered revealed because they are the source of creation. So the first two verses, the first two proofs of the Alter Rebbe are from the written Torah. They're from the hidden part of the Torah, not the Torah at our mouths, with the Torah which is on paper, which is in, because the first two proofs are about the first two letters of God's name, and the last two proofs are about the oral Torah, because the last two proofs are about the latter two letters of God's name, which are revealed. And because the every neshama has, Alter writes in chapter 4 in Atchuva, every neshama has in it the four letters of God's name. Are present in every single Jew. That's why we have the ability to think, to feel, and to do. Our intellect, our emotions, they all emanate from the four letters of God's name. So the Alter Rebbe brings four proofs corresponding to these four parts of our souls to say that our souls are not separated from Hashem. Nothing separate between us and between anything and Hashem. That's what there's four proofs. The problem is, if you count, you could actually find a fifth proof. The Alter Rebbe, when he mentions the passage of the Zohar, less asar ponimini, there's no place void of Hashem, the Alter Rebbe adds a verse over there. And heavens above and the earth below, nothing besides. So the Alter Rebbe, although he mentions a fifth one, the Rebbe's father doesn't count it as a separate one. And he actually explains how each letter of God's name corresponds to each of those four proofs. It's just fascinating how just the style of questions and the way and the association is just fascinating. But that's not what the Rebbe's question is on his father's teaching is about. The Rebbe's question is, for whatever reason, according to his understanding of the various proofs, there are only four. We're not counting the other line over there, middle of the Zohar, quoting another verse as a separate proof. A question is, there is a fifth level. The Rebbe's father knows that Alter Rebbe doesn't mean a fifth level because according to Kabbalah or whatever, the words don't fit the fifth level. The words that are quoted aren't about the fifth level. The question though is, there is a fifth level. Besides the four letters of God's name, there's also the highest level is the level of the Yud. Besides the Yud, there's also the dot on top of the Yud, the crown on top of the Yud. The crown on top of the Yud is parallel to the desire of Hashem, the Ratzon Elohim, which is even higher than God's wisdom. So the question is on the Alter Rebbe. If there are four proofs corresponding to the four letters of God's name to demonstrate that the four letters of God's name are connected to every single soul, and there's nothing separating us and Hashem except for Averis, why isn't there also proof why are there 5 proofs to point out the parallel between the neshama in the body and the divine source of the desire of Hashem, which is beyond Chach? There are 5 levels. There are 4 letters of God's name, and there's the crown and the yud. So why are there 4 proofs corresponding only to the 4 letters? Why isn't there a 5th proof corresponding to the crown on top of the letter yud, which we actually have in ourselves a parallel for? We have in ourselves the power of Mesiras Nefesh. We have in ourselves the power to devote ourselves beyond Hashem, beyond logic and reason. We have in ourselves the pintel yid, which is beyond our understanding, beyond our feelings. So we have something in ourselves which mirrors this crown on top of the yud. And yet, the Alter Rebbe only brings 4 proofs, doesn't mention anything about this 5th level. So why is the 5th level ignored? So to explain this, we have to zoom out 2,000 feet for a second and ask a more basic question. In the previous sections in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is trying to explain how there's nothing besides Hashem, how the tzimtzum is meant to be understood in a literal way, how nothing separates between us and Hashem, how the tzimtzum, where Hashem hid his light, doesn't mean literally shalom that he left the world, as some other sages try to interpret the tzimtzum. The Alter Rebbe says how wrong that is, and it's the opposite of our faith in Hashem. If you say tzimtzum is literal, then first of all, that means that Hashem has a body, and therefore he moved away from the world. But that's a kind of physical thing. Second of all, it's the opposite of our faith, that there's nothing besides Hashem. So to say that tzimtzum is literal is the opposite of our faith in Hashem. But there he doesn't bring so many proofs. He brings a proof or 2, whatever, but he doesn't bring a lot of proofs. And the way the Alter Rebbe is talking about this here, there's nothing that separates between us and Hashem, nothing physical, nothing spiritual. It sounds like he's bringing out something novel that was never discussed before. And he brings so many proofs to demonstrate this truth when there's something we know from the first section of Tanya in chapter 48, and the second section of Tanya in chapter 7, where the author explains at length the idea that tzimtzum and the idea of shabbatshalom, or the literal translation of shabbatshalom means he surrounds all worlds. The author explains it doesn't mean literally that Hashem is above and orbiting around the world. Rather, it means that God's light is infinite and it's everywhere, and it's just not revealed, but Hashem's light is infinite. So why is it in here in Agerat Tshuva that the Alter Rebbe needs to bring so many proofs to prove that nothing separates in us and Hashem? So the answer is like this. To understand this, we first have to go into the laws of chassidus. The laws of chassidus, the laws of what is considered interruption, a separation between your body and the mikveh. So there's 2 laws about the mikveh. One law about the mikveh is that when you go in the mikveh, if there's even one part of your body, even the language of halacha, even if your pinky is out in the mikveh, nothing has been done. You have to go completely in the mikveh. On the other hand, the biblical definition of a separation, the biblical definition is something else. But the biblical definition of a separation is if there's something on your body that covers most of your body, and you care about it, you're bothered by it. In other words, you ordinarily wouldn't have this on your body. It's like they have paint on your body or something, and it covers most of your body. Then there's a biblical. Then the Torah defines this as a separation between the water and you, and the mikveh is not. The tefillah is not it doesn't work. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy over here. On the one hand, we're saying when you go in the mikveh, you have to go 100% or else, or 0. On the other hand, we're saying that regarding a separation between your body and water, we're saying that that's only if you care about it, has to be the majority of your body. Why is there this discrepancy? The answer is that the tefillah, the immersion has to be complete. Your immersion has to be complete. The separation is about something else, not about you. So it's some other foreign entity. So that's the the importance of that foreign entity. So then we talk about the importance of that foreign entity. What is that foreign entity? It's not about you. One thing is about you, and the other is about a foreign entity. So your immersion has to be complete. But some other foreign entity we could already describe. We could already measure and figure out how important that entity is. Okay. So getting back now to the analog. In the earlier sections of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is not talking about the Jews. He's talking about Hashem. He's talking about how Hashem is everywhere. Here in the Agerat Teshuva, the Alter Rebbe is talking about us. Rabbi Moshe used to love saying this parable about the Jewish people. I know the origin of this parable. I heard it from him. The king who loved his son. Because he loved his son, he bought his son not suits. Not just he bought his son suits. He made factories to manufacture suits for his son, and he bought bakeries to make pastries for his son, and he hired musicians to play songs for his son, and he did all this stuff only for his son. He even hired bandits to attack his son, so he could hire armies to protect his son, to show his son how much he loves his son. So where is the king? Everything comes from the king. The bandits come from the king. The armies come from the king. The orchestra comes from the king. The companies come from the king. The bakeries come from the king. They all come from the king. Nothing exists without the king. However, where is the king? Where is the king's heart? Where is the king's essence? The king's essence is not in the bakeries. It's not in the orchestra. It's not in the people trying to hurt his son. The king's essence is in his son. The heart of the king is in his son. So the fact that God is everywhere, what does that mean? When you have a light, you have a candle. How far can you see the light of the candle? And how bright it is. It's very bright, you can see farther. Hashem's light is infinite. There's no limit to Hashem's light. Therefore, where is Hashem's light? It's everywhere. On the other hand, you cannot say about any specific item in the world and say this is godly. It's not a godly being. It's Hashem's light is everywhere, and even though I don't see it, but there's infinite light of Hashem which is pervading all of existence. But you don't identify any creature in the world and say this thing is godly. It's not godly. It comes from godliness, but Hashem is everywhere, but there's no association between Hashem's infinite light and the specific items that God's light pervades through. It's everywhere, and it's not the specific items aren't at all holy and godly and spiritual. They're created by Hashem, except for a neshama. A neshama, even the way the neshama comes into a body, the neshama is still one with its divine source. The neshama is not different to its divine source. The neshama is its divine source. And that's why the Alter Rebbe brings all these proofs. The proofs Alter Rebbe is bringing here are to demonstrate that even the way the neshama has ascended into a body, and in this process of this ascent, there are lots of mutations and changes in the neshama. Hashem goes from world to world and goes through all these. The light of Hashem gets filtered further and further and lower, and therefore you'd think that because the neshama's light is traveling through all and it's getting mutated, it is getting changed. The neshama now develops an intellect and it develops feelings, and not only develops intellect and feelings, the neshama's intellect and feelings are able to come into a physical body through the various contractions of the neshama's light. It's now very much different the way it was in Atzilus. It's not in canvas anymore. So when the neshama has changed so much before it descends into a physical body, so you might think the light of Hashem doesn't reach it. It's not the fact that infinite light of Hashem is everywhere. Okay, that's a given. We're not talking about that. But to identify the neshama as a godly being, to say the neshama is the existence of the neshama is godliness, that you might think it's changed. It's lost something. Therefore, the author brings these four proofs to demonstrate that even the way the neshama exists in the physical world, it's also godly, it's also holy, it's not something different to its divine source. And that's why the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention the fifth level. The fifth level is about Hashem's infinity. I have the point over here. The Alter Rebbe doesn't want to point how Hashem's infinite and everywhere. The fifth level is exactly the opposite of the point. The Alter wants to bring out how Atzilus, light of Hashem, as it comes into the letters of God's name. And each letter of Hashem's name has a different form, which indicates it's not infinite. It's the way Hashem's light is transferred in a certain specific way. So you might think the light of the Eibishter, as it has already become limited somewhat in the world of Atzilus, so that light of the Eibishter won't reach the neshama in the body. That light can stop. And therefore, the Alter says, no, ain't no regashmi uruchni. Since everything in the world is created by Hashem, Hashem is the Mahab, He creates everything. And all creations are like the light of the sun within the sun. Since all creations are like light of the sun within the sun, so the creations of Hashem are not considered a substantial entity to separate between us and our divine source. So just like by the laws of the mikveh, your immersion has to be complete. That's you. So the earlier sections of Tanya are talking about Hashem Himself, how Hashem Himself is everywhere. Hashem is infinite. He's everywhere. Here, the Alter is talking about the identity of you as you are in a body. Do you have a godly identity? You might think, we're Jews. We're all very quirky. We have all kinds of quirky things we do. I don't know if you heard the class I gave on Sunday, but on Sunday, the Rebbe mentioned how sometimes the Jew has a thirst for something, and he doesn't even know why he's thirsty. The Jew could as the neshama is talking to him, you feel this yearning. Your neshama is talking, but in your mind, you're like, I must be hungry. I must need a different career. I must, in your mind, it's all this stuff is going on in your head that isn't what your neshama is. Neshama is feeling thirsty, but the way the interface of your body makes you feel a whole different message from your neshama. So that's the reason that the Alter brings all these proofs to tell us that even the way the neshama is in a body, it's still a godly, holy being. It hasn't changed. It's still Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Not only is the Eibush everywhere, but even the way you are here in a physical body, you are godly, you are holy, and nothing separates between the Yid and the Eibush except for Averis, which is analogous to another halacha. I think I already passed the time. One more idea. The halacha is that if you're in your house and you hear Bais Bezalel, you'll hear the chaz, and you'll not answer Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, unless there is some avodah zarah, there's an excrement between the place you are and the chazan, then you're not allowed to answer. In other words, the only thing that separates the light of Hashem enters our physical body, and the identity of a Jew is a holy being. Any questions or comments? All right. Have a great day, Jonathan. Great day, David. Good throat.